In 1545, a Spanish conquistador's pickaxe struck something extraordinary in the mountains of Bolivia. What seemed like ordinary rock contained the largest silver deposit in human history. Within decades, this single mountain would pump more precious metal into the world economy than had existed in all of Europe for the previous 1,000 years. The Spanish called it Cerro Rico, the rich hill. They had no idea they were about to accidentally destroy the global financial system. This is another video where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. The story Spain told itself was simple enough. God had blessed their empire with infinite wealth. Silver flowed from the New World like water from a spring. Spanish galleons carried gleaming bars across the Atlantic, filling the royal treasury in Seville. King Philip II could fund his armies, build his palaces, and spread Catholic faith across continents. The conquistadors saw divine providence. The economists saw the foundation of global trade. Everyone saw prosperity. What they didn't see was the mathematical time bomb they'd just armed. Silver wasn't just money in the 16th century. It was the money. Every major economy, from Europe to China, ran on precious metals. The value of everything, from bread to land to labor, tied directly to how much gold and silver existed in circulation. For centuries, this system had worked beautifully. Precious metals were genuinely precious because they were genuinely rare. Supply grew slowly through careful mining and trade. Prices stayed stable for generations. Then Spanish America happened. Between 1500 and 1650, the global silver supply increased by over 500%. Picture a small town where everyone suddenly wins the lottery on the same day. The first few winners feel rich. The last ones discover their money can't buy a loaf of bread. The silver flowed through predictable channels. Spanish galleons carried it to Seville, where merchants loaded it onto caravans bound for the rest of Europe. Some went east through the Mediterranean to buy silk and spices. More traveled the Pacific route to Manila, where Spanish traders exchanged it for Chinese goods. China absorbed silver like a sponge. Their economy ran entirely on silver currency, and their massive population created endless demand for the metal. Spanish merchants could buy silk, porcelain, and tea in Canton for silver, then sell those goods in Europe for enormous profits. Everyone was getting rich. Everyone was getting richer. The problem was mathematics. When you double the money supply without doubling the goods available for purchase, prices must rise. When you quintuple the money supply, prices don't just rise, they explode. The Spanish noticed first. By 1550, a bushel of wheat in Seville cost 3 times what it had cost in 1500. By 1600, it cost 8 times as much. Wages couldn't keep pace. Workers who had felt wealthy found themselves unable to afford basic necessities. The inflation spread like plague across trade routes. French bread prices tripled. German beer became unaffordable for common laborers. English landowners watched their fixed rents become worthless as everything else inflated around them. Nobody understood what was happening. Medieval economics had no theory of inflation. Scholars blamed greedy merchants, bad harvests, or divine punishment. Kings issued price controls that only made shortages worse. The Spanish crown, drowning in silver, somehow managed to go bankrupt. For times, this wasn't mere irony. It was mathematical inevitability. Spain's silver paid for armies fighting in the Netherlands, Italy, and France. It funded the Armada that attacked England. It built churches and palaces across 2 continents. But the more silver Spain spent, the less each piece was worth. The crown needed ever larger quantities to buy the same goods and services. Military campaigns that once cost thousands of silver pieces now required millions. Foreign bankers understood the game better than Spanish kings. Italian financiers like the Fugas lent money to the crown at interest rates that seemed generous, knowing inflation would make repayment cheaper over time. They were betting against Spanish silver with Spanish silver. The crown borrowed against future silver shipments. When those shipments arrived devalued by inflation, they borrowed against even larger future shipments. The spiral became inescapable. King Philip II, ruler of the world's largest empire and owner of history's greatest treasure, died in debt. The social fabric tore along with the economic one. Spanish nobles, whose wealth came from land and fixed rents, watched their purchasing power evaporate. Merchants and traders, who could adjust their prices daily, accumulated unprecedented fortunes. Class warfare erupted across Europe. Peasants revolted against landlords they blamed for rising food prices. Governments debased their currencies to compete with Spanish inflation, creating even more chaos. The old feudal order, built on stable relationships between lords and serfs, masters and apprentices, couldn't survive in an economy where yesterday's wages couldn't buy today's bread. Political power shifted with economic power. Italian bankers influenced Spanish policy. German merchants dictated terms to French nobles. The traditional aristocracy discovered that ancient bloodlines meant nothing when upstart traders controlled the flow of silver. The inflation that started in Spanish mines reached China within decades. Chinese officials, who had demanded silver payment for goods, watched their domestic prices spiral upward as foreign silver flooded their markets. By 1640, Spanish America was producing less silver. The easy deposits were exhausted. Mining required deeper shafts, more labor, higher costs. The flow slowed, then stopped. The deflation that followed was more devastating than the inflation that preceded it. Economies built on abundant silver suddenly faced scarcity. Prices collapsed. Trade networks crumbled. The first global economic boom became the first global economic bust. The names have changed. The behavior hasn't. Modern central banks print money instead of mining silver. Digital transfers replace galleon shipments. But the fundamental mathematics remain identical. Increase the money supply faster than the supply of goods, and prices rise. Do it fast enough, and societies fracture. The Federal Reserve's quantitative easing programs pumped trillions of dollars into financial markets. Asset prices soared. Real estate became unaffordable for ordinary workers. Stock markets reached record highs while wages stagnated. Spanish conquistadors sought silver in mountains. Modern investors seek returns in markets. Both discovered that when everyone has more money, nobody does. The Spanish believed silver made them wealthy. Americans believe stock portfolios make them wealthy. Europeans believe property values make them wealthy. Economists still struggle to explain why creating money doesn't create prosperity. China still accumulates foreign currency, like it once accumulated Spanish silver. Trade surpluses still flow east across the Pacific. Politicians still blame foreigners for domestic economic problems. The Spanish Empire fell not despite its wealth, but because of it. The country that owned the most money became the country where money meant the least. History doesn't repeat. It just finds new mountains to mine.